Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another week of Art Saturday. We have some few new faces. For those that are new to this session or this program called Art on Saturday, it is a program or a project by the Art and Ubuntu Trust, which is aimed and designed to support community facilitators, as well as artists, musicians, and writers between the ages of 15 to 25 years. And my name, I always forget this part. I assume everyone knows me or they hear every week. So my name is Nkoana. I'm the program curator and I'm also a host for these sessions. Today we have a very special guest, Lefifi Tladi. This is the second session actually on that day, Lefifi Tladi. The previous session, he was not able to join us, but today we're very thankful and grateful that he is able to be here today to celebrate this moment with him. And to do that, we've invited Lerato-Rato Kuzwayo. Thank you for being here. Next to him, right there, he's got the Ike, legendary Isaac Nkoana. Thank you for being here also. And then we have Kgomotso. I can see you there. I spotted you there earlier. Ramushu. She's also joining us and will be speaking in this program. And we also have Kolodi Senong. There he is. I can spot him here. Thank you for being able to be here today also. Before we start or we begin with today's program, I would like to give a few minutes to Lefifi Tladi just to welcome everybody, and then straight after him we will view the short exhibition and then come back and talk a little bit. So Lefifi, can you please unmute yourself? That microphone, the red microphone. Yes.
Okay. I thought it was microphone, not your microphone. Yeah, I'm very glad to participate in this gathering or sharing of ideas, and I am even much gladder to find that my own private guru, Sir Isaac, and actually I have renominated him for Saint Isaac. This fuck it. Now he is Saint Isaac Nkoana as from today. So let's see what best we can do, and I hope people will be in a position to ask much more provocative questions and we can get into the annals of this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Lefifi. I think we're ready to start the exhibition, right? Malik, if you're ready, can we head over there and then come back for a chat? Thank you, Malik. I would like to introduce our speakers for today. Although the elder will come, towards the end, both elders, Lefifi and Ike, I would like to read a short bio of Ike Nkoana. He was born also in Lady Selborne, like Lefifi. He was born in 1948. After being forcibly removed from Lady Selborne, the family moved to Harangua, one of the townships near Tshwane, or used to be known as Pretoria. Despite the fact that Nkoana had received no formal training, he became an excellent artist. With time, he matured into a specialist in sculpture, drawing, and cuts. Through his work, he hoped to express the South African Black culture, suppressed and dying under apartheid. In the 1970s, Nkoana, together with Lefifi Tladi, Rantobeng Muku and Fikile Magadlela established an art center in Garangua, the first of its kind in this township. From then, the artist began producing resistant art. Again, welcome to Isaac Nkoana. And then we have Kgomotso Ramushu, who is a writer, a researcher, and project coordinator based in Johannesburg. Kgomotso is an affiliate of Africa Open Institute. She is devoted to preservation and promoting of African art. Kgomotso is an artistic director at Swart Gevaar Production, which produced, sorry to butcher this word out, but apologies in advance. Chila Haye Wolaye, the Linswi Playwrights Program, and upcoming publication Zuhoi Oi, among others. An advocate for African art and literature, she consults as a media strategist and researcher for organizations including Buku Children's Literature Foundation, Capital Art Revolution, Funda Community College and Artists Help Desk. Kgomotso's interest in the production of knowledge was shaped by a decade in education policy and grant administration. Welcome, Kgomotso, again. Lerato-Rato Themba Kuzwayo is also here. Next to say, he is a multimedia and multidisciplinary artist who was formerly trained in multimedia design at the Open Window Art Academy. Currently, he's focused on working in the documentary art, photography, and film. The artist believes in using art as an agent of communal change and is involved in several community outreach programs. He's a member of Capital Art Revolution, which assists and supports artists by putting together a series of photographic exhibitions taking place in different venues in Gauteng. Welcome, Lerato. I've cut some your very long bios. Apologies for that if it offends you at some point. For the sake of having more, a longer time for today to have this conversation. I also have Kolodi Sinong. Thank you for joining us in this session. Kolodi, I believe, is a PhD candidate currently, was working on Date, whose project is on Date Lefifi Tladi. Thank you for joining us, Kolodi. We have very short presentations, about 5 minutes each by all our guests. And I would like to start with Lerato Kuzwayo. If you can briefly, give us a presentation, and then after we'll speak with Kgomotso. Everyone who has questions, could you please try and hold them until the very end of the presentation? Is that okay? And then at the end of the presentation, then we could open up the floor for discussion and questions. Lerato, are you ready?
Sure. Dumela and greetings. Good day. How are you all? Briefly, what I'm presenting is what this work has meant for me. The work that we were viewing today, that has to do with new proverbs that are composed by Lefifi Tladi, and why we think it's important that these new proverbs need to be made more prevalent amongst our communities, because they reimagine us as a community and as a people. The ones that was selected for this particular online exhibition have to do with the arts and the artist, or sort of the artscape, focusing mainly on South Africa and the African continent, and how culture as a whole is in a way not measuring up to its truer purpose in the way that that Lefifi normally explains. So the Proverbs, in the way that we have been reading them, arranging them, and curating them, are arranged in a way that they are a form of a diagnosis from a healer's point of view, who then is making recommendations on how he sees that we can heal ourselves as creatives, mainly to heal our minds, so that we think accurately about the things that we're doing, about participating in the arts, and working on cultural rehabilitation through cultural work and creative work. And the work teaches us that language is extremely important, because Lefifi Tladi is someone who has been working with language and in many ways also playing with it, so that we get to have some of the iterations that come up from his wordplay or from his linguistic play. You know, I mean, typically that's how conversations start, as it started today when he made the joke about microphone and yourrophone. You know, so breaking down all these fundamental elements of words and getting to the root of them, then really gets us into playing with words, but in a more constructive way. And the same is reflected in how the visuals are also played with, and they are used as instruments, in the same way that I would think the instrumentalists of Malombo were using instruments to improvise what we already have as symbols, iconography, as sound, as language, so that it comes across renewed and refreshed, and in a way that it elevates our way of thinking and our way of engaging in things, in matters of life and culture and so forth. So we are presented with a very important body of work that seeks to ask us to be more intuitive in how we read things, but to also just be reading people, in how we observe what we see around us, whether it be artworks, whether it be sculptures, or whether it be the language that we speak, how deeply we read into it and how deeply we think about it, really enriches our quality of life. You know, because now we can use culture to get back to doing things that Africans used to do on a daily basis, like naming rituals, funerary rituals, and things like those. Those are things that within a cultural makeup what are the foundation of traditions and cultures and rituals. And in a review that we wrote for the trust, we began again, as I was speaking about the instruments Tsamalopo, to draw these lines between ways of healing, in ways that Malopo uses music to heal and these instruments to heal. Then the artworks become forms of malopo as instruments to heal, or they become oracles, or we can say that they become ditaola. But at the same time, we also speak about the artists themselves as ditaola, as one of Lefifi's proverb says, meaning that they are oracles that unravel themselves and read themselves in order then to start projecting ideas and visions and visuals that can then be read by those who are speakers of the language or who are practitioners of the culture. And those who are also being initiated into the culture can also go through the process. These 20 proverbs and collages speak to that. The collages are very interesting in a way that they are artworks that are created from artworks. I suppose in the same way that when creating poems, Lefifi creates, weaves proverbs in order to create a poem. Then he's been weaving together some of his artworks in order to create new works. And as we would say, you know, weaving one idea with the other so that they become almost like streams that converge into a single river. And you can almost see how the lines, especially these ones behind Zippo, sort of interact and are interwoven. And are interwoven into each other and then convey a different message from what the original image does. So yeah, it has been a real privilege to sort of see the work through the work, and interact with it, and be able to have discussions with Lefifi. And also, I mean, prior to this conversation, I've been having a lot of conversations with Sir Ike as well, who today taught me a new word, or a new category of a healer, who is more of a healer that focuses on the mind, who can sort of divine what it is and diagnose what it is our problem, without necessarily the use of oracles or ditaola, which I think rightly explains what it is that we are looking at in front of us as works presented by Lefifi, as a kind of a part of a healing process for the arts, using or reimagining what malopo could mean, as a form of visual artwork and as a form of language. When we think about it as a form of abstract expressionism from as we would say, from an Afrocentric perspective. So I think that is as brief as I can keep it, so that we can hear from everyone else and engage more on the issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lerato. I would like to hand over to Kgomotso. Thank you for switching on your camera. I was about to ask that, actually. Welcome and thank you, Kgomotso. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Thank you so much, Zippo. I loved that Chila Haibulai pronunciation you gave. Yeah. Hey, Dumelang, bonjour, masura say to everyone. Thank you, Art and Ubuntu Trust, for this exhibition and this encounter. I actually want to note, it's interesting, we have two exhibitions today. The wonderful audiovisual one we saw, and Sir Ike's sculptural exhibition there, which, you know, I hope we all freeze frame and just delve into. And it is wonderful to see the community which is gathered in this virtual space in the comments and participants section. So Zippo, if it's all right, I've written down my thoughts to enable me to keep to the 5-minute time allocation, and because I can't be trusted not to go lo. But yeah, many of us know Lefifi's painting, his poetry, and his percussive capabilities. And I believe that these gifts, Ditaula, as Lerato said, converge beautifully in the interlacing of sounds into words, and ultimately these proverbs, which we have interacted with just now, through his construction of Dikalidiema. Dikalidiema, or Maelelidiane, as some would call them, form part of the distilled wisdom of the people who raised Lefifi, and they're the inheritance of his generation, but also that which precedes his and the generations which follow his, an inheritance that we need to take very seriously, but also play with, you know, in this seriousness. Dikalidiema, or Maelelidiane, as we've said, form part of daily conventional perception, but they also pose deeper philosophical questions. They hold many cues we need to pay close attention to in our quest to deepen our understanding of the various languages that we speak and their evolution daily and, you know, through generations. Of late, we've seen how the academy and the state have taken many steps to, as we often hear, to preserve, to promote, and even to protect African languages. And many of these are very noble causes, but they are often linked to this idea of the utility of language. We often hear how they speak about the social, educational, political function of language. We know all of that stuff. We have many organizations and entities that exist to serve these functions, which are great, but rarely do we just revel in the beauty of language, monati wa puo, which is what Dikalidi and Majadififi allow us to do. Ditisha pulelo, dihudisha puo. These idioms, riddles, poems, they aid in the growth of language. Dinoncha puo, literally they fatten it, they give it depth. They empower us to create new words and to make greater use and creative use of our different vocabularies, to deepen our understanding, as I've said, of language, and even just to feed the imagination, which goes back to the idea of the beauty of language. And languages also serve a more ethereal function, which is difficult for us all to quantify. We need poetry to embolden us, you know, as users of language. And these Dikalidiema, as Lefifi is enriching them, and this repository, allow us to elevate our consciousness of material things, but even of the metaphysical ideas and rituals that Lerato has so beautifully spoken to. And sadly, there is a tendency to assume that as we speak this language and serve all these beautiful functions, we should come from a sort of prehistoric space, or that like Litona Dikalidiema, they fell like proverbial manna from heaven and we have to preserve them in a particular way. But no one speaks Setswana Sako Lowe. Like Lowe is the prehistoric space that we're told that Batswana come from. Because there is no such thing as Setswana Sako Lowe. Lefifi reminds us of the role that the artist, the writer, the poet, the griot, the sage, who uses language as their tool, plays in the development of this very language. The poet reflects many concepts and their cosmos in their writing. The poet has a role, as Lefifi has shown us, to take language beyond Anglo-Saxon understandings of time and even space. The writer has an interesting role to play in the elevation of perception, in cultivating our awareness of ourselves, who we are, of our surroundings, of our greater cosmos. Writers can ingrain or even challenge ideas that are in the collective consciousness. A simple act like naming the days of the week in your writing has profound implications, like Musupolo, for instance. places you in a particular calendar and its corresponding consciousness, meaning literally musupologo, the beginning of the work week, which is a Gregorian calendar function, which we can speak about later. So basically, there are two key takeaways from this exhibition from me, which also speak to, in part, what Lerato has said, and more of Art and Ubuntu Trust's work. Whilst reading Lefifi's Proverbs, I was compelled to read more about the development of the tongues that we refer to as Setswana, Sepedi, Sesotho. And I was intrigued by the idea that Sehuruto, Serolong, Singwatu, etc. became Setswana that we know through a long and complex process. Similarly, the language which we know as Chishona, which is in a sense my first language, is also refers to as Chikandamazeko, which is an amalgamation of Chikaranga, Tindawo, Chimanika, Chisezulu, Chikorekore, some of which are even languages that are fading from scribal cultures. These languages were marshaled into the current orthography and understanding we have of them by colonial administrators, by missionaries, by academics. Similarly, as we read Soblaiki and later J.M. Zime, we see the hand that these administrators and technocrats have in the formation of language and the ideals it conveys. So it's refreshing to read Lefifi's work, which he writes in Tlakanzuke, that beautiful, amusing, uniquely Pitori dialect, you could say. And this dialect gave Lefifi a world of possibilities, of remixing, of improvisation. And by divesting from linguistic purity, we have boundless possibilities to explore. And the second takeaway, before Zippo gives me the eye, is an anagram which we learned from Lefifi, where he says, Upulelo, and then when you read it the other way, Ulelopo. You are word, you are consciousness. And Dikalidi Yema are a gateway to this consciousness. Through word consciousness, we develop ourselves. Word consciousness is a pillar of our society, of our art, of our values. Wordplay is essential to the survival of a society. Through our daily poetry, we assert who we are, we assert and we project even our visions. All sacraments, which Lerato spoke about again, from birth, rites of passage, cleansings, rituals of transcendence, of projection, etc., are shrouded in verse. Even when we use medicine, herbal decoctions, they carry names, like ukanya gute, for example. I'm just thinking of something, or mochacha, or chachaulang, etc. Their strength is reinforced by words. Medicine, like other important functions of our society, are activated by word power, by word consciousness, and the music it carries. Malobo have rhythm, they have poetry as their essence. Words, once again, mimic the circles around which we gather. And Dikalidi Ema, when you read them, you'll see that circular writing, those circles which are formed. As poetry is recited to, drumming patterns, it's painted by percussionists, we perceive things, and it's heightened with our ongoing use of Dikalidi Ema, Tsumo in Shishona, of Maelelidiane, and this is such an exciting prospect and possibility, which Lefifi has given us a great role to take on, to write more Dikalidiema, more anagrams, more poetry, and more fire. Thanks, Zippo.
Thank you, Kgomotso. We will like to hand over to Kolodi. Thereafter, we will have speak to Sir Isaac or open up for questions. I'm not sure. Kolodi.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me. Now, my reading of this institution together with its attendant Proverbs, I took out of it Midi and the poem published today. Am I audible?
We can hear you, but you're not loud enough. Can you try and maybe speak a little bit louder?
It's not only louder, but also clear. The voice is not clear.
Wow. Okay, I'll start from scratch. My reading of is that audible?
Yeah, you can go on, Kolodi.
My reading of the Okay, from this exhibition, online exhibition, I came out with maybe at an ensemble and the poem Hari Tere. So my reading is informed by that. Firstly, since I've been researching about Mr. Kahil since 2017, so I read a lot. Okay.
I'm wondering if you're not using your headphones, if the sound would not be better. Do you have to use your headphones?
Yeah, the thing is, wow, it's noisy here. I think maybe that's the problem. I'm in a noisy space. Can I instead switch off the camera?
Sure. If that will work better, then yes, we'd rather hear you.
Hopefully now it's better. Okay, I'll
let's
talk
go.
again. Okay, I'll talk about maybe the formation of maybe, but in particular before 1979 when it started as part of the Freedom Charter. In particular, what happened before then? Because often when you read about media at an ensemble, you don't read about it before 1977. So I think the politics of what happened then informs what Lefifi Tladi's work is about today, even his proverbs. Also, I think black consciousness has been taken out of the equation in media. You read about it, they tell you how people started media. But in actual fact, media started before the ANC decided that this was their baby. Then I will talk about the poem Hari Tere, because I remember I even talked to Lefifi about it. Particularly, there is this growing scholarship where black consciousness or Lefifi Tladi's aesthetics are supposed to be obvious of the question of color. And now my argument is that color has always been the case. Hence, the adoption of media by the ANC and people like you won't read about them anywhere. Because remember, black consciousness then was about finding yourself as a black person. And then the only way to do that was to be among your own, who you can speak to without being aware of your blackness. So you listen to the poem Hari today. It is addressed to a particular people, not everyone. So the poem encourages a particular group of people to intimately talk amongst themselves. Hence, I read all this in the current exhibition. For example, you have Maboko Ahana Bete Afahot. These poets have no guts. They have been castrated. To castrate artists is equivalent to drowning a nation. It is time to create art in our ancient indigenous tongues. And you realize that these things don't start now. And you ask yourself, who has castrated the creatives? So now I read into these works together with its attendant text. See, castrated black people, particularly if you follow Harry today, that according to the poet, there are these particular people who always insist on being part of the disenfranchised, so that they always make sure that their hand is part of what is agreed upon. So lastly, I would like to say, Jay, although such things are hardly discussed in public platforms, following Harry again, I would say whiteness still dominates discussions on what should be day-to-day life experiences of the people. Thanks.
Thank you, Kolodi. I'm so sorry that we're not able to hear you 100%.
Wow.
But I hope Ntate Lefifi could catch on, some of what you were saying earlier. Perhaps the conversation can continue also. If Ike there, is it possible if you could say some few words as our elder before we open the floor to questions and Ntate Lefifi? Can you take the microphone?
Nkoana, ke thabela go ba le lena, ke thabela occasionally mo yona, mo go lekeng go tlhabolla setšhaba sa Tšea-Kgalaka, setšhaba sa Aforika Borwa, setšhaba sa batho baso, le diboledi tse di tla tlang, o ka re di tlo kitima mo tseleng e tee la bona ba laetšana ba letša le ditšhaba tse di tlang le bana ba tlang se se leng megopolong ya bena bjale ka ge Ntate Lefifi a ntšhitše mebereko ya gagwe le go laetša tsela ya lebogare ka nopela.
Yeah, I don't know. It would be very difficult to translate if you guys want the translation.
You don't have to.
Okay,
But if you would like to try, you could or summarize, but you don't feel obliged to. Those who are meant for that will understand.
yeah. No, I think in short, it would be that Sir Ike is very happy to be part of this pathfinding mission that we are a part of through the work that Ntate Lefifi has done in order that we uplift our consciousness as a people. And yeah, he's just very happy to be a part of it, in brief.
Thank you, Lerato. We're not only here to listen to presentations, we're also here to participate, share our own understanding of Ntate Lefifi's work. Similarly to what Kolodi did today. I would like for Ntate Lefifi, if you could say a few words from what you could gather from the speakers we're talking about your work. Is it possible for you to share with us your thoughts? And
yeah, ke a utlwahala bjanong mos. All right. So the first correction I want to make is in the introduction that the music that is being played, kwa dashiki, and Batumi is not participating on that presentation. Right? So they have to erase Batumi, right? Ito helebe dashiki nine no show, because that's what it is. And the second part, when Lerato was talking about, this is not a correction, but gave accent or we are not talking of dolos per se. Meverego e rieta kilitao. Right there where Ike and Lerato are seated. O kono one or di taula si di lugum rao. And tono we miracle or creator. Like the collages they created, this discussion is so we should understand actually what return to actually recreate the art and so is that artist is also trying to really initiate the economic our actually so Tindra Lopo actually it's an go feeling no Malopo every positive creator so the equality as they call Mayele, they represent the Kam Korifetulang Lilemi Ive vehicle ya bulopo. So that we become the healers. And as Kolodi was pointing out, a lot of silence about some important people. But come coronavirus too as Malo. Actually, the more they keep quiet about other people, the more because by silencing them, they are accentuating how they are being neglected, because it becomes even more visible than Baba Buang Kabona. That's why usually dire, hey, Lona Levana Kotela. But Kyo no Suti Lemi Pilaur, Hareva to Bana Kotela, Revana Kotela. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ndate. I would like to give those who have some questions about the opportunity to speak. Okay.
Zippo, could I please?
Is that Bridget?
There was me and somebody else at the same time, so I want the other person to go first. I'm not sure who it was. I have a comment.
Okay, I don't see a hand, and so I'm not quite sure who would like to
Bridget,
speak.
so that was me, Kgomotso, so I think you should make, and then I just wanted to make a comment about also responding to Kododi, but after Bridget, thank you.
Oh, Okay, Kgomotso, I wanted you to go first, but anyway, I will. Thank you. That's kind of you. But maybe I was going to talk about something else. So maybe we can finish the discussion with Kolodi, and then I'll raise the other question I wanted to raise. And Lefifi, I'm sorry for that mistake in the credits. We'll fix it. Don't worry. I apologize.
Yeah, it's more of a mistake, not miss.
Yeah. I just wanted to remark about Midu and the Freedom Charter and Kolodi's general remarks. It's interesting. I was reading Ngugi's Pen Points, Gun Points, and that book with the long title. And it's interesting that in the introduction, he speaks about how in 1996, he was hosted by the Congress of South African Writers. And, this progressive organization, which has gone through the travails of apartheid censorship, how he hopes that they will create that this society, which has these artists in their ranks and writers in their ranks, and, he envisions a country which is devoid of the kind of censorship which people like Ken Saro-Wiwa, who he cites in that introduction at the time, had just been executed for writing about, the Delta State challenges, which are currently in court, as many of us will know. Then he speaks about Ken Saro-Wiwa, and he also refers to Wole Soyinka, I think's comments at a prior African Writers Conference in the 70s. And it's interesting to remark how organizations like COSO are, I have to choose my words very carefully and be diplomatic, but still scholarly in this discussion. And it's interesting how an organization like COSO over time carries oppositional, what do they call it? That concept of heteroglossia, that discourses carry traces of oppositional discourses. So when we carry the burden of running society, of regimenting writers associations and all of that, you become an organization like COSO, playing the role of silencing people who were part of the African Writers Organization, for instance. So there is a function, and it is necessary for some peoples to be silenced in order for COSO to be perceived as brilliant, and for the memorializing and historical significance of some people to be placed over others. So it's a very interesting remark that Kolodi has made, and I think it's something that more people should write and research about.
And Kgomotso.
It's interesting because COSO doesn't even exist anymore, I don't think. And we seem to be in a time where on the one hand, there's the most amazing blossoming of ideas, the most beautiful articulation of ideas. And at the same time, the organizations to take the necessary actions forward and to change the institutions in our society, to continue the process of change, don't seem to be there. But what I wanted to talk about that was just a comment in response to Kgomotso. What I want to talk about was this notion of the ritual archive, which is a notion which has been put forward by the Nigerian historian, Professor Toyin Fololo. And he speaks about the short period of the colonial archives. So the colonial archive was just 65 years. And the colonial archive is merely in print, and in many African countries it's neglected. Of course, in South Africa, the colonial archive is longer, but it's still in time span, it's still so short compared to the African history and culture which underlies it, precedes it, and follows it. And it seems so interesting when Lerato begins to speak about Malopo as a ritual, and and how embodied in that ritual is a multifaceted expression of art, music, dance, healing. And it seems to me that the closer I get to some kind of understanding of African art is that the key thing about African art is a multifaceted view of society, something like Ubuntu, where one person's point of view isn't enough to tell the story. You need all these different facets in order to tell a story. And it's so interesting to me because, I mean, I'm older, I'm not going to change, I'm unilingual, I was brought up in English. It's going to be very hard for me to get access to the knowledge that resides in the languages and to let the words trip off my tongue the way they trip off some of your tongues. But it's so clear to me that there is a revival, that there is something happening, but the question is, and going back to what Kgomotso is saying, what organizational forms do we need to build in our society? What institutional readjustments do we need to have in order for these things to really flourish? That's my question, comment, and so on and so forth. I'd be so grateful if somebody would respond to those thoughts.
Yeah, I could do that if you don't mind.
Sure, Chamdo, you can go ahead.
Yeah. Well, the thing, Brita Bolelang, it's very, very important to understand that this is the prime reflection of actually how apartheid actually affected and disadvantaged the white South Africans, because the white South Africans have been more damaged by apartheid than we, because we still have ourselves. And the white South African has lost that lilopo that should have been embedded in them by becoming South Africans. Because to be a South African, it doesn't mean your damn pigment. To be a South African is the culture, the heritage, which the whites were deprived of because they were trained to think that they are Europeans. And to be a European is to be born, bred, and buttered in Europe, And to be an African is nothing to do with your skin color, but is to be born and bred in Africa, And these programs should address these issues and make them understand. That's why I said earlier, and not only they should actually be brought into a renaming ceremony, And we discussed it, quite in the beginning of 1996 and things like that, because we have a very, very good, great, fantastic sculptor, Bariki Gerrit Potgieter. And when you look at Gerrit's work, if it was not written Gerrit Potgieter, you would think or any other reactionary name like Isaac. But it would be very, very, very important that, and I even put some money Horega Pudi to make a renaming ceremony for Gerrit Potgieter, And we have to really begin to understand these white people are not going no motherfucking way, They are there to stay. And this is our children that we need to heal. I know Baba Nalindi channel, the celebrator, just because Nalibana Pusman, they are not to retokomela makwa. And that kind of fucking situation. But this is my position. that we have to collectively recapitulate, all of us, because apartheid is a nya. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ndateli Fifi. I have some questions by another artist that's in the room, but who has problems connecting. So I will read them here via SMS.
Okay. You know what is SMS against one? So semula itasi. Yeah, SMS. Okay.
Firstly, the artist was wondering about the scale of the artwork. But he has some questions regarding some of your, I think he was thinking the titles, but it's almost like 2 exhibitions in one. So one of the questions, Skimang Lihulere is in the room here. He was wondering, you say, for instance, this art is dizzy and numb, right? And there are, this art is, okay, I think he was talking about where you say, oh, these artists are muddy waters, you can't drink from them. He was wondering if, are you speaking on the artworks or are you speaking on the processes of the artist? And he's wondering if you can suggest, okay, if so, is there a suggestion that it might be impossible to fully access the works, or are they intended for viewers to make their own interpretation? I'm not quite sure if you got that. So he's asking if for, you're saying these artists are muddy waters, you can't drink from them, right? He's wondering if you are referring to the artworks themselves, or if you are referring to the process that the artists undergo. If so, is there a suggestion that it might be impossible to fully access the work, or are they intended for viewers to make their own interpretation? I hope
you can make, or somebody could answer that. I don't have to.
Okay, I think what is being said refers to, and as I was presenting, I was speaking about the entire artscape. So we're not specifically speaking about artists or their artworks in separation. We're speaking about them as a whole. So the cultural practice as a whole is what has become so dry that the viewer cannot drink from it. You know, it's a dry well that the viewer cannot drink from, because a lot of contemporary works are sometimes not engaging enough with social issues at a level where we can actually have a social conversation about them, or a cultural conversation about them, in the way that we can have a conversation about the Kalidiema, or we can integrate the Kalidiema into our conversations in order to elevate the understanding of matters that we may be grappling with, right? So the work is accessible and readable by anyone, but what value is drawn from the work is most times not as culturally significant as it should be. And sometimes there are, of course, issues of artworks being difficult to access, especially once the artworks become popular and they go into the, the gallery space, museum spaces and all those things, then they can be also issues of access to works that speak about a people that people do not have access to, in order for them to be renewed perceptively by the work, like to have their perceptions renewed by the work.
Thanks, Kgomotso. And then there's a second question also related to the visual aspect of Lefifi's work, the actual work that we saw today or we're seeing in this exhibition. And the question is that, is there any correlation to some of the patterns or mark making in the work related to Tswana imagery?
You know, art per se transcends ethnic alignments. There is no such a thing called Setswana or Pedi or Xhosa or Zulu paintings. You get it? Even our common artistic way of working, now it has been tribalized into Ndebele art. Can you imagine that kind of thing? Yeah, and right now, if I can show you something very, very interesting that I've been working on. I hope I understand how this shit works. No, okay. I connect. The problem, I think, is with me. The problem is that I've been working on a technique, yahukopa or hudila. You get it? And that technique, you cannot say hudila, kisi Tswana, kisi Zulu, kisi Mangma. You get it? Because it is a traditional way of design. Yeah, so Harina yet anything regarding, so say because those mural paintings, you find them all over Africa, yeah, the geometric kind of things, yeah, but they be Makoa, they put it under the bag Yamateveli. In the same way, when we look at cave paintings that were done by San women, but because they were called Bushmen, we actually think they were painted by men, but it's not true, So it's very, very, very important to understand that we are creating a South African art because Maburu all these years had put our work into township art. Yeah, and we were producing township art, and until Ritomo or now Ruira Miverako Yamalopo, you get it, which becomes a new identity. Yaruna, or Harisa is a township art and Rependa Selop. And until those artists, the young ones especially, Baruti Webulo Bobo, Kidi veteran and I can say that because I am a student of Seaik. So no amount of education will actually move us out of the township as long as Resa Pushur, Bonabo Seaiki, Bo Estamaslangu become teachers. And actually, with Seaik doesn't even need to teach nothing. It has just to be at the academy there. ba bone gore a real artist o phela bjang o etsa eng wa bona? But unfortunately, this is not our country. We don't have the power to do that. Okay, I think, let me not be long-winded.
Lefifi, I think your camera is on the floor. Is it possible if you can put it up back to you? Yeah, exactly. Thank you. There's a comment by Bravo.
Thank you for.
All right. I have one question and I have one comment by, I think almost everyone's connection is very bad today. I have a comment by Bravo Simkunu, who's in the room today, but he sent a comment on the chat because he's unable to speak. I will read Bravo's comment. He says, I differ with Lefifi. There are Sotho flower patterns. I think it differs in the question that Gemang asked earlier about the Tswana patterns. He says, I differ with Lefifi here. There are Sotho flower patterns, Ndebele geometric patterns, Nkunu designs and mural. The differentiation is there and it is marvelous. That is Bravo's comment.
I can respond to that. That the geometric designs are everywhere, as I pointed out earlier. With even in Mali, you find those geometric, even just copy das back, those geometric designs are there. And everybody, the only thing, I don't know where the hell do we get this dynamic of this geometry? What informs these geometric designs, you know? And speaking about Sotho flower patterns, it's not absolutely true. Those flower patterns, they are everywhere, as I explained earlier, Dimo Hokope, and Malomo, they are our wealth and things like that. And it's not only one ethnic group that designs these things. If you look at you can see, even when people are raking malapa, there's lots of incredible things like that. But let's not develop this into a dialogue there. Okay.
Sorry, I'm muted. Kolodi had a question. I think he mentioned this a little bit earlier on when his sound was not working, but he asked if you could please talk about your understanding of castrated artists, where the castration started, who castrated them, and how this castration manifested in the present.
Yeah, I mean, we are a castrated nation. It's in the artist thing, because we have not been in a position to define ourselves. You understand? Our point of reference is not related to our own location, to use a very simple way, you know? And the university today, their objective is a neo-colonial objective, and it is always based on castrating our own perceptions, you know? And that's why I said, we have to go back. And there are still a few Malopo artists, like Bonabo Saiki, you know, and even me, I am part of that group, Yabo Mutaba, Mashiangwa. You get it? The art must help us redefine ourselves. Remember? And that's why we have to go back to Tona, this the service I made a long time ago, inspired by this Ndebele art called Mon Ndebele Blues. Remember? Okay.
Thanks, Dade. Abdul Kadir, can you please unmute yourself? And then after you, we'll hear from Kgomotso.
Thank you, Lefifi. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kaman. It's a very important concept when you raise it, and it's very important about the decolonization of the mind and reclaiming back its own culture and identity is very important. When he says the artists are castrated, means they are cataloged according to the ethnography of who's playing whom and what you are. So we reach the level that in Africa now today, we are defined by someone else, and we believe and we regurgitate what someone else has taught us. So that is very important, and it's very dangerous to repeat it. I remember that one student who was doing his PhD at the University of Wits, I don't call Wits, but I call Fits. Why a black student who goes there, he will get a psychological and emotional fit, and he will never be stable. So he will be what do you call it? Split personality. He will get that. What is the funny thing is that he said to me, "What is about township art?" And I said to him, angrily responded to him saying, "Is there something called one of the towns, what do you call it, the neighborhood in Johannesburg, like Santon art? Have you ever seen a Santon art?" He said, "There is no Santon art." And then why you define it township art? So now coming back to that ethnographic definition of divide and rule, it's natural for the colonization or for the colonizer to define and to give a name. So they internalize that notion. They say, is Sepedi art, is a Xhosa art, is this art, is that art? And they forgot the whole great picture, which is at the end of the day, art started in Africa and developed from Africa. And at that moment, when it started from Africa, it didn't have an ethnic or regional or group definition. It was an expression, artistic expression. It's a high level. Don't forget, what do you call it? Today, archaeology demonstrates that. But the question is that our university and our students who come out, they get a different perspective and different understanding. And now, worst of all, it will become loaded with ideological interpretation, why the question comes, who you are and who you're speaking for. So that is where the muddy water comes from. That is where, according to what I understood, and might be wrong, but nevertheless is that even certain writers in Africa today, when they write, I know one famous writer, Nuruddin Farah, who's a Somali writer. We were together at the Djibouti conference of the Somali intellectuals. They asked him at the airport, who you write for? And Nuruddin Farah said, I wrote for the people of the world. They said, no, don't talk to the people of the world, talk to us first. You are not writing for us. So the same thing happens to the African artist, wherever he is, he has to speak to his own society, apart of speaking to others. And he has to know his society, not the way that the West knows them through ethnography and everything, but in a ways that dignifies him and represents it in a total aspect, in a total holistic manner. That is what I meant about that. And sorry for what do you call it, intervening a proudly South African discussion. Thank you.
Yeah. You just contradicted yourself. We are not, we are Africans here, all of us. But I want to make a little input about this township art. Is that the disadvantages of township art are two. First, a township is a ship you can't sail. And number two, that's a ship you cannot graze. Thank you.
Lefifi, thank you.
Kgomotso, your hand is raised.
Thanks, Sipho. I hope I'm not taking everyone too far back, because now we had spoken quite a bit about castration and self-definition. I just wanted to go back to the point that Lefifi made about Malombo and Khobalilobo as a tool in decolonization. I think we are robbed by translation in many ways, because often when we speak about Malobo, a healing system requires, African healing systems have different modalities, work in different ways, and they have to, and the different aspects of healing come together. There is purgation, there is diagnosis, and the actual healing. It isn't a senzenina kind of healing that Malopo empowers us to do. If you know what I mean. It's not a healing about creating a new proudly South African nation that forgives. It is a process of purgation that Malopo empowers us to do. And also just the idea of Malopo is important for us to redefine ourselves and to project, sort of pre-Berlin Conference cartographies. Even the word itself, Malopo ka Sesotho, Malombo Achivenda, Rirombe in Shishona, like one of the practices in what we call Chishona or rather Chindau healing modalities. Because even if you listen to the language that is used in Malopo ceremony, in healing, if you look at the drums that people carve and the different songs they sing and all of that, you will be able to journey through who we are as African people and for us to, to define ourselves. I'll give you a very practical example. I grew up in Zimbabwe, so I learned Chishona and Ndebele. My mother grew up in Zambia. She speaks Chilozi, a language which empowers her to speak Chiroshi. You hear the words, similar to that Malopo connection, Malombo, Malombi. Chiroshi is the same language which Sirozi is, which people speak in Botswana. So I think that this tool of Malombo as a purgative tool as well is an important thing for us to reflect on. Even purgation of ideas like, I'll disagree with that notion of castration, because we are feeding into the hypermasculinity, which hegemonic, imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy needs to thrive. It needs us as African people to internalize our gendered ideas of who we are in ways that can often be hypermasculine. So it's interesting, but as much as is it not perhaps a good thing for the African artist to be castrated vis-a-vis white masculinity, the way we understand, the Bassian opposite of the archetype that Lefifi, for example, demonstrates. If we look at the art history canon, we're trying to get away from centering the same white men who define this masculinity of which we are castrated by centering the practices, which Lefifi refers to, practices which hold ideas which in another thought system can be viewed as gendered. But it is those practices that hold even the names of colors, for example, which cannot be found in present day dictionaries and all of that. So yeah, a convoluted idea, but I think you get me, sure.
We are almost headed to the end of our session. I would like to read Ndate Vusinkunu since he's not able to comment by using his voice. Perhaps I'd like everyone, including Ndate Lefifi, to hear his comment, which is written on the chat icon. He says that we are walking on a landmine field here. So much has happened in the African arts to challenge colonialization. We are definitely not a helpless lot. We create firstly for ourselves to affirm, rediscover, and dream. Generalization about the condition of African art are dangerous and perpetuate the victim syndrome. That's what Vusi was saying. We have very few minutes left, and I would like anyone who would like to put up their hand or who has a hand up to unmute themselves, and we'll take the last question or comment.
I would like to add something to clarify one thing. It's true, you see, in language which we speak, they are not it's not our language. And in a way that we cannot express what our thought process are. We cannot articulate our thought process are. So it's not generalization. It's that we are, what do you call it, damaged. And a damaged person cannot define and say in a clear manner. Take an example, my sister now spoke about the male, what do you call it, the masculinity, about castration of the white man's masculinity. If it's not castrated, it cannot be effeminated. Why? If I say effeminated, it goes to the other side. So at the same time, we say that language is a different thing, that you cannot articulate properly what you want in a common sense, to understand the intention, what you intend to say in a form that you intend to say. And the most important thing is this, that it reflects our wounds. And we have 99 wounds. So the question that comes is that which wound we heal first? You see, why? If catalogization of colonial terms happens, and the concept and the way of thinking is shape it and determine it. And if you say, I'm not this, you are generalizing. So you are, from another point, you are pushed toward that thing to remain in that box. But if you say, no, I'm not here, you are defining, or you are confirming victimization. So it's a convoluted notion. So we have to understand and redefine ourselves. That is the decolonization process, is a catharsis process that we have to go through. It's painful for whatever we have believed, and based our notion of understanding will be shaken. So that is the point which I would like to interpret and define. What would you call it? My brother and comrade Vusi Chunu explained it here. Thank you, Vusi, and thank you for everyone. And sorry for my regurgitations.
Yeah, I would like to put a little accent on what my brother just said. I wrote in one poem that which means now is the time to heal the wounds in our scars. You get it? It's time to heal the wound in the scars. Because when Bravus is talking about working on things, we're still talking about healing the wound. But the thing is, we need to heal our wounded blood, which in simple English, we could call it to revisit our DNA in ordinary man's language. Yeah.
Thank you, Ntate Lefifi. Bridget, I'm wondering, because there are two essays by Lesego and Lerato-Rato. How do people get hold of those? Will we send them out on newsletters? Is the catalog going to come out anytime soon? How can we share these two essays?
Yes, two beautiful and wonderful essays, and I think really, really path-breaking in terms of the ideas that they bring to the fore. And I think they, just to respond to Bravusi and to Kemang in the chat, they really bring out how Lefifi's art is forward-looking, it's contemporary, it's alive. It's, in fact, the thing that, because I've always had this soft spot for Sol Plaatje. And when Lefifi said to me, oh no, Sol Plaatje's work is neo-colonial, his proverbs are neo-colonial, I thought, oh, what's he saying? And then slowly I grew to understand that he's speaking about contemporary life in his proverbs, idioms, sayings. And the multi-layered nature of the Malombo ritual that Lerato, well, sorry, just to finish on the proverbs. So Kgomotso beautifully explains how, in the article, how Lefifi used sepitori, a very contemporary language, a dynamic language, a language of today, a language which reflects people's movement and change and dynamism in history. And how, even if you're looking at the image that's on the screen, which goes with the title of the exhibition, the OASES Need to Wander into Streams, there's a dynamism there, there's a movement. We're not talking about getting stuck in the past, but we're talking about what Ernest Mangoba said is, what are we leaving on the way of this so-called progress? What are we cutting ourselves off from? What do we need to take with us on this journey into the future? And I think that Ntati Lefifi is saying the same thing with his art and with his words. He's saying there's a dynamism, there's a forward movement, where are we? But don't leave behind these very important values. Sorry, this is a long way around of, and also I mentioned about the ritual archive, but I didn't sufficiently explain. So the ritual archive is described as all of that knowledge that exists in our society and is embedded in rituals, is embedded in indigenous knowledge systems, is embedded in practices, is embedded in interactions between people, exchanges between people, and age-old knowledge. And our question really as Art and Ubuntu Trust is, how does that knowledge, because last week when we were discussing literature, Bra Wally said something very wise. He said, if it's not institutionalized, it doesn't exist. And so therefore, what are the new institutions that we need to build that would be dynamic, forward-looking, and take the important part of the past with us forward? So that is a question that we have to face as South Africans. We don't even have COSO anymore with its problems, with its riches and its problems. What do we do? How do we build new institutions which are premised on this new knowledge? Just this is a long way of getting around to saying, how will the catalogue be available? We are producing a catalogue of this exhibition. All of these works will be reproduced in the catalogue, as well as all the sayings, all the proverbs and idioms, and the two essays, the two wonderful essays by Lerato-Rato and by Kgomotso. And as well as there will be a small record of two accompanying workshops where artists produced, they produced visual renditions of the sayings in a response and in a dialogue with Lefifi's work. And there was one workshop in Pretoria led by Lerato and by the late Ezekiel Bodeli, and also Justice Nkoana, Mziwaki and Lovo, Sokaya Charles Nkosi and Tumela Mokabakose took part in that workshop, and they made lino cuts. And those lino cuts will be available for sale, and to fulfill one of Ntati Lefifi's dreams, which is that the sayings would go out into the world. They wouldn't just stay in the white cube, but they would go out into the world. People would have them on their homes, the way people have Bible verses or Quranic verses or whatever. They would also have some of these sayings. And I believe Lerato could speak a bit more about it, but I believe while they were working together, they had very beautiful exchanges and discussions. And then a second smaller workshop took place in Thohoyandou with Grace Avashoni, Grace Chikuve and Avashoni Manganya, a friend of Ntati Lefifi. And they working with handmade paper, which Grace had made from mealie husks, beautiful, beautiful paper. Any artists who want to do work on paper should be aware of her amazing stuff. And then they spelled the Proverbs art in string. And we're hoping that post-COVID, it will be possible to have a live exhibition, a physical exhibition, where Lefifi's work will be, where these works will be, where there'll be a dialogue and translations and so on. But in the meantime, the catalogue will come out. We'll advertise it on our website, and the information will be available for everybody. Sorry, that was quite a rush of talking at the end when everybody's a little bit tired. But thank you, Lefifi, because you always get the energy flowing.
Okay, before we say goodbye, thanks Bridget, could we hear from Tulufelo? Just one last person. Tulufelo Moshe, please unmute yourself.
Good afternoon, or is it evening? Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I think the question I was going to ask, I think Bridget has covered it, but I will ask it was, how is the exhibition going to, or this setup going to exist beyond the Zoom session, which is already covered? But also, I hear the wounds that everybody's talking about. And I think my question is, like, where would you take it? I think there's a lot of, we've said institution, but we have not actually made reference to certain institutions or spaces. For example, if you are going to speak about South Africa, contemporary South African art in tertiary institution, one of the biggest factors, driving factors, have always been the corporate sector, your Standard Bank, your Sasol New Signatures. Not only are they targeting students in those institutions, these institutions are using those competitions as curricula. So I wanted to know, Malopo Ana, where do we take these healing processes? If we are going to use the metaphor of the body with 99 wounds, which would be the first wound to start from this healing process? Because there are a lot of contributing factors that lead to this in contemporary South African art. What I've noticed has been the nature of Standard Bank Young Artist of the Year, how corrupt and muddied that process is, and all of these various other competitions. So where do we take this process of healing? Which would be the first part of the body to start, or which would be the first wound in the body that we start healing or stop the rot?
We go back again to contemporary. My brother, is a temporary con, if you see what I mean. And the only way to move out of this temporary con is that we need all these young artists, you know, to become apprentices, you know, to be groomed by the real life artists, you know? Because these academies, they're just producing people that are not anchored, you know? And all these things, they are informed by consciousness, you know? And consciousness is a hell of a program. Because when we talk about consciousness, today, the colors, they only help us to be aware. They not make us conscious. Because awareness, when it's committed, then it becomes consciousness. So we are still in the process of just awareness. You know? They make you aware of techniques of this and that, and like pseudo history. And some of the artists are still alive. Bobra Louis Makovel, you know, who I think is the last one, you know. And in terms of Bobra Don Matera, you know, James Matthews, these are people that are alive and well and are not in these institutions, irrespective of these jive institutions. They will give them honorary doctorates and things like that, you know, the Gaunonyana, and it puts them to sleep, actually. Yeah.
No.
Okay.
the difficult thing about institutions, I know even in the, I mean, when we were reading Sir Ike's bio, we say that he was not formally trained, and this formal training implies a certain thing in terms of the institutionalization of this training. And I can sit here and spend a whole day with Sir Ike and receive very formal information that exists nowhere in the institution as that we just sort of highlighted. And the difficult thing about trying to institutionalize of trying to institutionalize people into spaces that remove them from their own sort of cultural natural environments is also a huge part of the problem, because Sir Ike is here in Harambu. This is where the school of anything that is associated with him in terms of sculpture and in terms of woodcuts or visual work, you can find information from. I don't necessarily, I mean, in as much as I understand the importance of it being accessible in a learning institution, while the artist is alive, you go to the artist to go and drink from the well, which is what METSWEDI actually means.
Yep.
So it and METSWEDI being the foundation, so it means it is time for the institutions to branch out, to go and seek the knowledge from where it sits, so that it can retransmit it into itself. So it's very difficult to sort of institutionalize all these knowledge systems that exist in a way that is palatable for the colony and the colonial aspects of what it means for someone to be qualified, because we can sit here and argue every day about people who have degrees and have no understanding of the gravity of some of the work that we are dealing with. But someone who has been sort of bred from a cultural and indigenous point of view and a point of work understands exactly the importance of the work, especially when we use language as a vehicle to sort of transmit these things. And to also answer Solofelo in terms of one of the things that Lefifi says is that where we have to start is actually preschool. We have to teach Banaba preschool these philosophical concepts in language, and Digalidi allow us to do that, or Ditai, or these word games and wordplay and all these things. So this ability to play with words, or to play with symbols, not just words, to play with visuals, to play with wood, to play with clay, really then can inculcate in us, and in the simplest way that we can explain it to a 5-year-old is the most complex that we can get in terms of how in depth the philosophy is, because it's very simplified in the way that the Sesotho or the language Sepedi and Setswana sort of presented, as opposed to when we speak in English.
Lefifi, did you want to say something? Oh.
Hey, wait again. Something happened here. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, because Lona kamo na agilu pipila. But the point that Lerato is making, for you know, the whole approach, actually, the principle and premise that we have laid for art is an expression of your perception. So before, but by who deal pencil, barba draw, or the camera taking photographs or things like that. Let us introduce at the daycare center. You know, but enlighten a perception it's of all. We have to have sessions where we train our children how to smell, you know, and identify different smells, even if it means we should just take different instances, who identify how to smell it. And then after that, let's improve their tongues. Buy all this, go to these Indian shops, regular spice, who educate the palate of our children. Because generally our children's palate is just limited to, yeah, lechwai, swikiri, yeah, a little bit of curry, you know, and yeah, salt, and that's it. But in the same way, we have to educate them how to listen, because we all grew up hearing, you know, and once we can let the children grow up to a level of sound consciousness, you know, that when they listen to music, they can even identify that, oh, this is a cello, this is a dulcimer, you know, this is a sindorondoro, you know, and things like that. And educate their sense of perception, you know, of touch, you know, all these things are before Batsara you know, and I know it as a fact. There are a lot of young people who can read upside down music and things like that, but if you play certain instrument, they can't hear them. So let us first, at the kindergarten level, develop the perception of our children. It's very, very, very important. Their sense of smell, you know, and yeah. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Lefifi. We have Khafela in the house. Khafela, could you kindly unmute yourself?
Marinara Sugeda. Why didn't Sugeda? Because I wasn't gonna say anything, but anyway, Caroline Sugeda, okay. No, thanks. It's been interesting to listen. Really educational in many ways, and provocative in some ways. What I'm worried about, Chamza and Lerato, is we should be careful not to flatten terrain, because it's important, yes, to critique what happens in institutions, but at the same time, to acknowledge efforts by Black academics, right? And for instance, I've invited Lefifi to teach some of my classes with an idea that we are opening up a conversation that is normally not available in institutions. And if you are aware of that, it's important to acknowledge that it's happening in some ways. It may be small or the other, but I think we are limiting ourselves when we think that we can simply dismiss efforts that are available. So that what I teach now is theater, right? And I recognize the methods that Lefifi is talking about. It's the fact that, you know, just a simple example would be that theater, when you look back, is informed by ritual. That is, our mystery systems give birth to theater. If retire, for instance, this thing at Taula, Kasetswana, there's a thing called mochacha. Mochacha ke plante e kase Zulu, maybe re ka re ke ntelezi, ne? And go na le process ya go gagaula. And go gagaula is a process ya go exercise, right? And to do that, you need words, you need dance, you need gesture. And that is my theory for teaching drama, and it is consistent with ideas Malopo and drawing also from people like Mudzunga Tabula, who sits at UP. She's a trained Sangoma, and she teaches us that, you know, there is a sense in which Didenya Malombo is akin to theater, and she demonstrates that through her work. And this work sits in institutions of higher learning, so to speak. But what's important is also to take this work and spread it, if you like. And I love the efforts of people like Mutsumi Makhene at the Funda Center, because that's another place which I think is important, because I see it as the last frontier of Black consciousness expression, because all these other institutions that carry Black consciousness have been suffocated through, you know, lack of funding, while, you know, your liberal institutions like the market theater, the state theater are promoted. And it's important that, you know, when people tell you who they are, you believe them. If I say my work is for the state, it means I work for the state. If I tell you that this is the market theater, it means, you know, I'm marketing your pain. So the market and the state, you know, they work together. And when we talk about, you know, institutions that, you know, are suffocating the arts, we need to look at the state as responsible for this kind of suffocation. Lefifi's work, for instance, transcends ideas of tribe, ideas of, you know, village and so forth, although it draws from that. And it's important to understand that vision, and that is why he is not celebrated, in that it disrupts what people are presenting as art, you know, what the government wants to present as art. You know, often it's an obsession with the past. How many Waza Alberts can you have? How many Swizo Banzis can you have? You know, and for me, also an obsession with victimhood, which is tiring, because, you know, often we are talking here about healing and stuff like that. And I'm really concerned that, you know, we may be drawn too far towards, you know, victimhood. And it's important when we talk about art to understand this vision of transcendence that is available in Lefifi's work. And just to say a few things, really. I don't know what I'm saying, but I hope something landed. Thank you.
Thanks, Rafaela. That's the closing, but I'm wondering if do you have anything you'd like to say as a closing before we say bye? I was just wondering if you have something that you're thinking about in your seat, or you're okay.
I'd love to thank everybody, like as a welcome, especially this exhibition. It's a very fresh, different exhibition from most of the works that I've seen of Lefifi. This brings a new understanding, a new way. And especially when we discuss this about the museums, starting with youth from kindergarten and so on. I think if we, in the next meeting, possibly working on it. Thank you.
Thank you for that closing, Mr. Ike. I would like to thank everyone for participating in.
Actually, I would like to ritual this program in our tradition.
Okay.
And the tradition is that there's a poem I wrote for a Sudanese painter called Mustafa Bashir.
Mm-hmm.
And the poem is called Notes from a 10-Piece Obsequy. Footprints of time sink on the white of your desert canvas. Sealing Mushama Watisiile, where the concave echoes of silent snowflakes ring the bells around the insane camel. Home is where the music is unstrained. Sita Ramela Muritiwa Pefo, whispering winds passed by the broken ear of an unechoing shell, and in the unwinking eye of a frozen elk lies the hallucination. Marugudimela Mwepa Tutsi, O Sudan, your eternal rhythm has tripped over this faraway dream that can only be seen through an inverted aurora. A flood of white light showers my colors into carbon crystals that makes the elk's eye. A thousand whirlwinds bow their heads in silence, petrified whirlwinds under the spell of mystic Sudanese brushstrokes. The spell breaks, the first tear drops, unleashing lacrimonious wails out of these welling sands that become one move. The hedonistic god bound to Helicon, Sudan, here I return to the oasis. This meretricious megalomania has drained my landscapes. I am the pathological vertical invader whose presence is pathos. For my accolade, my presence is acidic, fare thee well, land of illusion. The mystic voyager is gone. What remains is the mirror and how we permeate in and out of this looking glass. Memory once more trapped in the bars of albino bees. Our reality, an anointed floating shrine calabash out of which flows the apology. Mustafa Bashir, the dark prince of doom, our everlasting boon. Sesileng musimamo taila tupa, lisilo kemuselati. Ma Afrika Mustafa ke Kgomotso ba rona, mekgolokwane ya Sudane ke metlhala ya boswa ba rona. Le ba re ngwana wa re rile re re ya le botsa lona la re botsa gore re le a tseba gore ngwana wa lela mathalero a buwela a re tlhasetse re tlo tsewa ke mathale a rona. Thank you.
Yes, yes, the Lefifi.
Yeah.
Thanks, Daddy Lefifi, and thank you to everyone. Thanks, Ak. Thanks, Lerato-Rato. Thank you, Kgomotso. Yeah, and thanks to everyone also that we hijacked along the way. Khafela. Sorry, but not sorry. Thanks, Kolodi. This session is recorded, everyone. I see we have some regulars there. Thank you for joining us every week. And those that are not regulars, come by. It's very nice here. These sessions are recorded and will be available on the Art in Ubuntu Trust's YouTube channel. There's something that we like doing here, which is showing face and taking photographs. So if you are decent, can you please switch on your camera just for like a couple of seconds? We'll make a photo and then say goodbye.
And we say thank you to Lefifi and to Zippo.
Please switch on your camera. Hey, in that day. Hi, Malik.
That's Malik, who's been arranging everything for us. Thank you, Malik.
Thanks, everyone. If you have any comments or feedback, you can just email feedback@ubuntu.org or check out the website @ubuntu.org also to subscribe to our mailing list. It will help you to just get mail out on the next session. For instance, next week's session is on Ns Mangoba. We're showing the video, it's filmed at home. Next week, Saturday at 2 p.m. because that's our usual time. So hope to see you next week or somewhere in the future. Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, people. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye.
And thank you. Bye, Lefifi. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for thanking me.
Okay.